dorje chanche de lo na ro da ma ba me la che che ga bo ba de sa she ja ken ken karma ba she she choing ge je pan ze na da nian da zha mian yin gen da rinpo che riwan pa sam ge xin de chen pa ma mo pa yin lo do ko lo rinpo che norbo rinpo che simo rinpo che sa she
다들 양 다네 다 답을 타겐기 천섬럽디 다 더서 류게벤 좀도 더 샤산 야보면서 들을 정도 무튜네 단 되마고체 다드네 지당게 된 거들 제시 야 가시실라요 알아 드린주스다는 샤보 단도 샤보 진이지 근데 드린지 야체 선이 현대 소야래 선이 때문에 저 소야인 주사는 선이 매합체 근데 나니까 양지 점을 돼야 있어요 드린주사는 매합체 시행인가 지시하면로 시행인가 지시 시행인가 봐 니만 같이 시야도 야는 니만 직니 대체 가서 제대로 비차이
In terms of reading the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, we have read up through the 8th chapter, and this seems like a good place to stop with the transmission, the reading transmission. However, there are still a few points left to explain, and so I will continue to teach for a few more days. However, tomorrow we have the puja for the teachings to flourish, and so we will not have teachings tomorrow. The day after that, we will likely also have a puja of some sort, and then following that, I will continue to teach for another day or two as is necessary.
지당기에 답을 타겐디 되네 냐메 답을 하지기 되네 마음발이야 안미지기 지 나랑 지 제마소 삼바로 진짜 여기 미나 네 미세기디 공기 제베 남림 답을 타겐다 남저 림부치 칭화라서베 댄주남 댄주디디 스부슈스 다다다 시비나 아나가 제와데 케메바 인스 데레제 소요아레 디균진의 차네 다 개치부직 차리요아레 다드네 균진 신다지 가려를 수위미나 안에 냠에 타볼라지디 동아 송제기 템바 냠시난게 차디어레 지당게 급티두산에 별이야 아 냠레 징게서 아 짱보 냠레나야 너 냠레 징게서 너 짱보 냠레나 진제기 다 가수에 록스 somara ta shukchenpur buchi yongde yore kabdi du sanan yame tangpur buchi ge an donga songje somara tinje ji nyamle nang de yang cho doi ningbodi an cho kadam ban ma gyube gyosum gillam rimde tan karjada dosho ge nyamle thamje ge ningbur buchi ba chade yore 제상 대냠시에낭 와춘 럽도 총사양 가담반데 럽도 총벌에 아니 세시 나사당 디주양 가담베 이베레 세시 냠레 나사 다드네 나가 초기 차샤위미나 아는 나소기 냠레 타다가 닝보디 벤신 나로바네 마르메시도 규네 아니 총베데 지주 레셰베 도지바도 쳔베 아니 가서 차게 시험보다 나로 추주기 냠네 데 가서 지주 밀레레가 요마슈니 규네 규데바데 냠셰나네 도난 동아 손제기 안 템바르 무시 템바 드리지기 가서 지경 변송 아 이말에
Now, the Jewel Ornament of Liberation was written by Gampopa. And Gampopa said that in the future, if there were individuals who were unable to meet him, that they should read his treatises, the Jewel Ornament of Liberation and the Precious Garland of the Supreme Path. If they were to read these, it would be no different from meeting him in person. And so for this reason, these texts are extremely important. Now, another important reason is that Gampopa was an individual who practiced the sutras and the tantras in union. He practiced them together. At that time in Tibet, people who practiced mantra only practiced mantra, and people who practiced the sutras only practiced the sutras. This was the custom of that time. And yet Gampopa practiced both the sutras and the tantras in union. Now, the essence of the teachings of all the sutras is the teaching on the stages of the paths of the three types of people that comes from the Kadampa lineage. And so Gampopa received this from the Kadampa lineage. He also received his monastic vows from the Kadampa lineage, and he was taught in the Kadampa lineage. In terms of the tantras, he received the essence of the tantras from Milarepa, the laughing Vajra. He received the teachings on the Mahamudra and the 6 yogas of Naropa that came from, that were passed down from Naropa, and practiced these. And so, in this way, the practice of the mantra was passed down through, he received that from Milarepa. And so because of this, Gampopa became an individual who was able to uphold, protect, and spread the teachings of the practice of the sutras and tantras in union.
다른해 다른 신기 원저기 툼 가서 원저기 냠내 탐치 초 가담 받아 tumze. Musi기 냠렌디 ene chage chimboda tumbar zene ene jegi kashure kasha chu ninje kada gyubale ya kasha chu ninje ene tabu ge yusa chumbarela dangwa la ya kasha chu ninje ge damba dadre ji chumbare 대한 답으로 붙이 고랑기 nga tada simjian la pen tawandi cho kadam be gu jins narobe mengadi naropa na ma yu de be mengadi samoyores yinaya tene ji karuda kadam be mengadi mebe mina 나로베 당하디 미신달이야 배야 디스칼라하 제가 가담비 명아디 로름징 타송의 펜샤와 수바던 신기 기부 중우지기 로진시 비냐 대단 300이 당화 지하여브레 기분 징 로진시 비냐 대단 300이 아니 진냠네 지하여브레 기부 친구 로진시 비냐 대게다 수 매바단 300이 냠네 차여비 인두산에 디규젤 된다 하나 로름징 타송 그리지 좀이면 들려야 가다르지 펜도 차기 락샤는 것으로 차상하게 되듯이 나로바네 마 유디베게 차게 신비명하디 로르 셴보 언제 장방문 손삼으로 새로운마 되절베 지 소사 집장으로 근데 온도 소스에 가사지를 마다베게 로드 멤버들이야 아니 자기 집에 당화 제비네야 미세가 가져 지 뇌도 머롱으로지 인주산에 미세 편도요 알아도 가보시라 임그래 드린 인주산에 조의 맹아라 되네 로지 기부 충우지 비네야 당부 기부 충우지 비네야 되고 로짐기 장네 담은들이 기부 침보 내지 차가 심비 당화 때문에 뇌도 롱아지 용어의 인상 디균zel라 되네 아니 차가 침보 이 당화 마덴병 응르도 되네 저 까담베게 명하다 튜베게 로종거를 못해서 오늘 제가 로종 섬으로 명하다 튜베 내지 기호승 로장한테서 오늘 로고베 거봐 침보여봐 거봐도 교수 침보여 그래 삼천기에
Likewise, in Gampopa's tradition, all of the preliminary practices are done in accord with the teachings of the Kadampa tradition. The actual practice is done in accord with the Mahamudra tradition, and so this is the particular instructions on the union or the mixing of the two great rivers of the Kadampa and Mahamudra that became the tradition of the Dokpo Kagyu. This also is the instruction of the Dokpo Kagyu. It is the instruction on the mixing of the two great rivers of the Kadampa and the Mahamudra. And so Gampopa himself said that his ability to help sentient being came due to the kindness of the Kadampa tradition. The instructions of Naropa on Mahamudra and the 6 yogas are very profound. And yet, without the instructions of the Kadampa masters, then it is difficult for them to bring benefit to other sentient beings. And so in this way, by teaching the union of these two traditions, he was able to teach the instructions that are appropriate for all individuals. If an individual is of the lesser type of person, then he had instructions then there were instructions that were appropriate for their practice. For the individuals of the middling type, there are instructions that are most appropriate for their practice. And for the instructions of the people of the greater type, there are also instructions that are very appropriate for their practice. And so in this way, there are instructions that are beneficial for any person's practice, no matter what level they are, the lesser, middling, or great sort of person. With the instructions of Naropa in Mahamudra, however, these are only beneficial for those people who have the highest intelligence, those people who in their previous lives have already undergone the training in gathering the accumulations of merit and purifying their beings. And so for lesser individuals who had not already done this, then they were not really appropriate vessels for the teachings on Mahamudra, and it was very difficult for such teachings to benefit them. And so, in this way, by teaching the instructions on the stages of the path, or the three types of people, then even for the lesser types of people, there are instructions that could help them gradually train their mind so that they could become appropriate vessels for the teachings on Mahamudra, and then actually become someone who would be able to practice and receive benefit from the Mahamudra instructions. And so, for that reason, it is important to, before we do the instructions on Mahamudra, it is important that we have the instructions that fit with the Kadampa tradition on the stages of the path for the three types of people. And I think that therefore there is a great reason and purpose for these instructions.
phe khanjige jong ya tene cho kadam be menga dang an chage chimbyegi nyamle ni sunju du nyamsle nange de zedu de ne sunju du nyamsle nange de ta tabu ge yu dang da ribu gende ba da de teni zambaji chadi yare 대양 조 로겐데 바데 겐데 베주 주규디 소리야 남주 가르송거라잖아 가담 닝마다 사르마스 드니 뉴스안에 안에 제르무시 연셔들이야 가담 닝마스 안에 제르무시 펜에 안에 지 가르소야 조가 전주 너린치 몰아서 봐. 나도 저기 가담비에 명알이야. 이 가담이 교수님을 전도 나가지. 근데 제가 토네 아니 가다지 가담 때봐. 라랴. 세월 참 되게 좋은자. 아니 가담 스타마스지 되게 용수 참 되게 좋은 거래. 다들 제르무시 냠랭이 규바 가르쳐다지 냠랭이 실업 규바 다디 아주 남게 다 디난다 웬선이 유사되어래 웬선이 유 다 웬선이 유 나로래야 아니 간데 그 유착에 첨버스 간데 그 유착에 첨버스지 다데 가르쳐야지 치명아 차상으로 두셔야래. 어다들이 뉴스안에 안 뒤에도 지 차가 치면이 없는 게 여기 세우시라래. 어다들이 뉴스안에 조가다 믿기었음 일러린다. 차가 치면아 손제도 냠슬랭인데 안 벼가지 정나 다부가 유당. 되네. 조겐데 봐. 가르래 다티니 조르다도 차리요래
In the snowland of Tibet, the people who practice the practices of the instructions on the three paths from the Kadampa tradition and Mahamudra are the Dapokaju tradition and the Gelugpa tradition. It is these two traditions that practice these. Now, in the Gelugpa tradition, usually we speak of there being the old. They often speak of there being the old Kadampa tradition and the new Kadampa tradition. And in speaking of this, then everyone up to Tsongkhapa is considered the old Kadampa tradition, and after Tsongkhapa, using his Lamrim Chenmo, the great stages of the path, as the basis, they emphasize the practice of the three types of people according to the tradition of the Kadampa instructions. And so, in this way, they clarified the Kadampa instructions even further, and it became, and therefore, these are the new Kadampa tradition. Now, in terms of the lineage of the blessings of Tsongkhapa's practice, there's also a text called the lineage of the lineage of the essence of radiance, or the Weso Ninju, and this
not text. This is lineage.
This is a lineage of the radiance of the lineage of the radiance of his instructions, and this instructions includes all of the what are called the instructions of Mahamudra from the Ganden or the Ganden Kaju tradition. These are complete instructions on Mahamudra, so it is also very clear that they do the practice of Mahamudra. In any case, in Tibet, the traditions that practice the Kadampa tradition of the practice of the three types of people, and the Mahamudra tradition are the Dakpo Kaju and the Gelug tradition.
딱 한다라 되게 규제를 되네. 드네 가르쳐야 돼. 가다야 너는 답을 타겠니? 다 개침을 샤디야래. 개침을 샤디야래 데 이나이 양. 안에 가르쳐 개침을 차원는 신식이 될래야 지 가르쳐 왜 퇴상 공송 양련신이 데스 가르쳐 사받는 신지 용도요 말해. 그냥 아주 다보게 유기 아주 다지 지시 중계에서 말하면 다지 도나 다보게 유비 균세여도 저기 냐면 다볼라지 당 아니 대라마 지주밀을 해봐 대라마 되네 마발라서 쉬일로래 나버숨데 다배 간정이 정리야 아는 그 유기지 매번 숨을 차대요 알아 북두사 중국 하나 두보다보다 차대요 제가 대숨게 소럽 디술이야 아서다 북도 죄세 공다 롱다 배 잡대는 다 죄서 예나면은 다 디술 차대요 알아 다이민의 대숨기 송디술이야 더지기 다지 도나신을 대해서 공부를 시작하는 거야. 그 소소소기 다지 티다 아는 소소소기 슝 명아 대들이야 대 전류를 체체 다들 제도 동고로 봤다 다들 괜다게 말해 전류 체체 아들이 시주스다네 다보를 시기 럼림디 다 참서 데스 롱게서로 지기한 비지 롱게서로 지기야 데스 지 가서에 디제리 야베 미나다 바 지 잠네 가서 라메 마지 숨베 미냐 숨베 겁텔마 제마도 신 남준 시비지 저 참에 다디 자심 게 좀지 비지 지체 텔레야 퇴섬 공송 연례 지게 가버셔 제가 디규젤 때네 아주 안에 달로네 송리 안 그 유근셔가리야 안 답에 타길래 누린차 다 로숨지 다 로숨스 체스팅이 아래 다 로숨보다 차로임에 가셔 공도 로숨거진이야 누린차 다 누린체에 걸려야 담보디 타르갱이 빼면저 망보셔 아래 제가 디게 파 두르체 cikli shudache. Da dine targengi nala chanshabegi lungdang, lungsik mabuchi yare. Ji gada tenchuk lungsik mabuchi. Da digi di lungsik di kongzen. Dine targengi da shung kongwogi. Shung kongwo la dis karwe kongwo ba jaryon kongzhiyon risane yan jik tokbara sayar tokbara tizumgi shirichoba tizuli ya tokzhe dagana shin kane tizuli ya tajhe dinde chiche kandara taloni sundi dis karchoda nga samyeki thai labrim thai gengi shungdili ya da mi sami jik tonan sabarabshili ya dinde bezuribchi.
So the text on the stages of the path, the jewel ornament of liberation, is an extremely important text, but despite its great importance, there are not as many people who practice it by listening, contemplating, and meditating as would be expected. In all of the traditions of the Dakpo Kaju, the 4 elder and the 8 younger, and basically all the traditions of the Dakpo Kaju tradition, all of our practice comes down to the practice of Gampopa, and the practice of his guru Milarepa, and the practice of his guru Marpa. These are the 3 forefathers of the Kaju lineage. They're like the source. They're the origin of all of our instructions. And so their teachings are like the basis. They're the source, the origin, and the basis of all and support for all of our teachings. However, sometimes it seems difficult for us to really give too much attention to the teachings of the 3 Kaju forefathers, because each of the Kaju traditions has their own tradition of instructions, their own philosophical texts, their own key instructions, which they emphasize. Now, of course, they do need to emphasize this, and this is not at all a fault. However, with the jewel ornament of liberation, sometimes it's just like there's a transmission given of it. Perhaps a Lama will give a teaching on it, and only then do we pay attention to it. Otherwise, we do not seem to consider it very important, and there are few people who actually listen, contemplate, or meditate upon it. And so for these reasons, starting this year in the Kaju Gunshu, we began to have conferences on the jewel ornament of liberation. And we'll have these conferences for several years. The plan is to have the conferences to run for 3 years. Whether we will complete the entire text in 3 years or not is difficult to say, but the plan is we will have the conferences for 3 years. And in the conferences, the first thing we do is we'll compare the various different editions of the jewel ornament of liberation, and go through and edit the words. Now, also, when we look at the Kaju, at the jewel ornament of liberation, there are many citations in it that come from the treatises as well as from the words of the Buddha. And so we are searching for all of the sources of these citations. And then another factor is that when we compare the different parts of the text, there are different difficult points that come up and various different doubts that arise, questions that arise. And so we are examining the difficult points that occur in the text. And so by doing this, the hope is that we will be able to spark new interest in this text on the stages of the path, the jewel ornament of liberation.
Dana Singi Jume Gunche Gablia Nanine Sondi Tabu Tagin Chi Charge Dange Chi Charge Those Carre Lirum to Stigore Tadi Ngara Yunden Chewe Yunzana Dana Singi Chikarre Tabu Tagin Shundilia 다 유예가 समरবে 유슈지에 균zel 된 땅에 마치 있어 말해 다 인비냥 땅 안에야 다다 다 내가 더블릭 대왕 समरবে 더블릭네 더블릭 대왕선은 장도 야나네 tab malik basana da do khaina ya da ji kar jania sange kamabe ji chen chebe in yusane da ti gyunzen den dange ji ma 타게 shunu ma 제시를 지켜입니다. 현재 참에 대해서 도나로 쳐야지. 미상으로다 민라 떠거 봐. 민라. 민들 싶이 떠거 봐. 네 뉴스안에 아니 지된 차베 젠장이 민주산다. 당에 민들이 쿠르여베 인산 디지 데스마지 답답하게 돌을 계제를 시에입니다. 현재 참에 대해서 도나로 쳐야지다. 다는 신기 다 답답하게 했어야 돼. 어찌기 인사를 해서 그렇지. 다디지 개침부를 인사를 해서 그렇지. 개침부 인부 준세인데 답답하게 코랑기 가르에 주제의 주제기 주제의 주제기 가르다지 쇼래야 네바니에네 개침이 있어서 말이야. 다디 그지 티디도 까만베지 티디도 제자디 개침이 있어서 그렇지. 가실 때 제시를 삼천 정도 들어있어. 다디 유저된 난인도 티브레 가도 참 샤도 일단 때내면도 지잖아. 다 사나 사야가 좋아요 아래. 간다량 디레를 지 도안에 말. 다디 최고야 대양 저 답답하게 쉬운들이야. 지 3회 지 도나사버치 이용 삼다 되지만 답답하게 쉬운 샤바 인스.
And also, in the nuns' winter Dharma gathering, starting from last year, I have been giving the teachings on the jewel ornament of liberation. The plan is to continue this. And the reason for doing this is not because I am so highly qualified. It's not because I am an expert, such a great expert in the jewel ornament of liberation. That is not why I'm teaching it. And whether you consider it my good luck or whether you consider it my bad luck, I have been given the title of the Buddha Karmapa. And so since I have this title, if I teach on it, then everyone will pay more attention to it. Everyone pays a lot of attention to names and titles these days. And so in terms of how things are in the world, if I teach it on the jewel ornament of liberation, then naturally people will get more and more interest in it. People will think, oh, it must be important. There must be something about the jewel ornament of liberation. And so for that reason, even if people are not really able to have certainty in the text of the jewel ornament of liberation itself, in either the text or in what it teaches, they will say, the Karmapa has been teaching from it, so it must be important, and therefore people will pay more attention to the text. And so that is why last year I began to teach. Now, I'm not sure how long these teachings will continue. My hope is to finish it next year, but we will see how it goes. At any rate, I hope to finish it next year. And so these are the reasons why I have been giving these teachings, and my hope and plan is that it'll spark cause people to have more interest in this text.
가장 쉬운 신기 다 겸주 동바 지시 소에 봐도 꾸줬음 땅기미 인야베게 되게 다 탐제시에 동발렘베입니다 안 동바텔이야 되네 미균 초기 되네 가르쳐 미균 초기 겐 가바다 튠베 초기 겐 다들 야르겐라 셰도 네 랍샤라 럽고 여베므라
For the refuge vows, the vows of going for refuge, as I mentioned yesterday, there are vows that once we have taken the vow never to reject the 3 jewels as long as we are alive, this is the vow of going for refuge. From that point of taking the vow onwards, in order that we can eliminate the obstacles or that are the conditions that are not favorable to holding the vow, and in order that we can increase the conditions that are favorable to it, we need to train in the precepts.
대량 드네 다 랍샤려야 그룹니기 랍샤려 셴의 규베다 랍샤려 시라메 다 대량 지 가르르 미디움이 쇼 가버쳐봐다 튜저 주버쳐봐 진짜게 고안에 다 간다 야게요 미냠바다 야게요 소소람베 동바데 마냠바다 동바데 코네 콤베도 야게요 다 진짜니래 마데베 버려
Now for the precepts, there are the proscriptions, the things that we must not do, and the prescriptions, the things that we should do. So the proscriptions are in order to stop the things that are not favorable to the vow. And the prescriptions are in order to increase those things that are favorable to the vow. And so in order to improve our vow, in order to stop those things that would cause the vow that would decrease or diminish the vow, and increase those things that improve the vow, then that is necessary for us to train in the precepts once we have each individually taken the vows, in order to improve the vows and prevent them from weakening.
다 되라야 벤다 딩상 페바 망부지 다 지게래야 갭줄 주고요 하래 갭줄 근데 저 아메리카도 망부 주고 하래 아니 유럽도 망부 주고 하래 저다 아메리카도 비질이야 가봐도 갭줄 신 갭줄 신베이나 안데 갭줄이 가르르 갭주기 톱단으로 들라 갭주 톱단으로 아베 젤리야 안다 아메리카에 가르르다 집에나 팀도 가려야 되는데 송 근데 제가 마다베 갭주와서 갭수 송 이내 되게 팀도 kur 먹어봤더니 매비브라 레인주산에 겹수 송하는 신기 다디 팀 쿨겨가 다 전도 빼는 되시래 다가는 신기 군조 숨리야 겹수 손에 군조 손을 겹수 손좀이 고민해 봐. 오늘은 그 군조 숨기 겹디기 따드 라니 겹투 버지가 의미나 따드 군조 숨기 랍절이야 랍절 숨네 랍절다 네 드레셔 의미나 가수에 드레셔고 알아 계시 랍절라 마네비체 마네비나 군조숨 겸내수 때문에 편 마용의 토도 예바 망부치 용대 알아서
These days, there are many Tibetans who are going abroad, who have gone abroad as refugees. They've gone to America or gone to Europe. And when they go to America as refugees, they seek amnesty and they seek refuge, and they get the rights of a refugee. And once they have received those rights, then they need to abide by the laws. They need to keep to the laws. If you go abroad as a refugee, once you're granted the refugee status, then there's no way not to follow the laws of a refugee. And so it's similar once we go for refuge. When we go for refuge, we have to keep the laws of going for refuge. So this is like the analogy. So once we have gone for refuge to the three jewels, if we merely going for refuge itself is not effective. Once we've gone for refuge to the three jewels, if we do not, we actually have to keep the precepts, and so it is important for us to abide within the precepts. And if we do not, then not only do we not reap any of the benefits of going for refuge, there are also many wrongs that are piled on top of it.
대래양 랍자 대래양 공도 네 쉬변난 신기 가장 쉬변난 신기 땡죄를 총에 랍자랑 명아를 총에 랍자 니 용대 아래 야나 계획신이 전부 샤라웨기 셰바달도 되네 투몸 모임베 랍자당 투몸에 랍자 넘버 2
Now, for the precepts, as I described yesterday, there are the two sets of precepts, those that come from the treatises and those that come from the tradition of instructions. Alternately, according to the teachings of the great Gerishini and the great spiritual master Sharawa, there are two sets. There are the particular precepts and the common precepts.
다대양 땡주기 랍지 사디왕도 샤비미나 땡주를 중에 랍자데 간다랬잖아. 되네 두아네 중에 두아사디 사댕에 나로 두아사죠. 어다 데레 중에 두에게 제순다네 중에다 랍지게 두아네 숨에 랍지게 용디야래. 다 되네 냥엘레 데벤도 냥엘레 데벤도 다 자게 나로를 디 가르 다보니에 반진 섬데 다디 디제스 다네 가베 랍자 디 나는 소샤 가베 랍자 숨이온데요 그래요 되네 라벤 비말레 미드라기 점주 연락 주버사죠 디나로를 순샤베게 랍자 디나는 순샤베게 랍자 주베 랍자 숨사 비존데 유스레 다나 신기 람준게 장제 딱 람준 장제데 카시스나디 조지 송으로 카시스 나졸라서 제샤레스 딱 간다라야다 람준랑데 사죠 다 디기 나로리아 투모의 랍지 축스 dombe tenjene sombe 랍지 유당바 다들지 honde 유스레
Now, in terms of the precepts that come from the treatises, there are the treatises that come. There are the precepts that are taught in the Vinishchaya Samuchaya, which is one of the five Bhumi texts of Asanga. This is the compendium of ascertainment. This teaches 8 different precepts. Also, there are the 3 proscriptions that are described in that are given following the Sutra of the Great Parinirvana. And Vimalamitra discusses in his text on the 6 aspects of going for refuge, describes 3 different prescriptions, 3 different precepts that we must accomplish. Also, within the auto-commentary on the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment. Now, this auto-commentary, there are some who say it was written by Atisha himself, others say that it was written by Nakso Lotsawa. But in any case, it is known as the auto-commentary on the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. And in this, there are 6 different precepts that are given. And so, in total, there are 20 different precepts that come from the treatises.
다드네 계신이 좀 샤라웨 송베 투모 뭐이베 랍자당 투모웨 랍자사데 다다디 투모웨 랍자사데당 명아라 주노웨 랍자사데 되지보입니다. 다 투모 뭐이베 랍자사데당 다다디 두안에 주노웨 랍자티니 고든지보 있으라
Now, in the instructions or the precepts that come from the spiritual master Sharawa, there are the particular and the common precepts. Now, the particular precepts are essentially the same in meaning as the precepts that come from the treatises. And the particular precepts are the same as those that come from the compendium of ascertainment.
Tela tumo maimba sungwa gyumzinde karasana. Tumo maimba sungwa de simge da drene. Nyamsalamba yibina, tumo maimba labja chantugu yes. Simge da drene. Bena shengi chedu sangye drubala, dine parche chagre samne. Dine parche chungba ina pangbo jigdang, lo pangbo jigdang, dine dana shingi gyoba chire samne, dine gyabdra labja de sungba yimina, tumo maimbe labja lan drugo res. Dine pennas, duwane shebege labjate de res de son train du sane da tumo maybe sa to sambe karo sambe gi chada somrwe kulon la rale de wisre kulon semge gi sine member semge gi simbe kwane jamre labjale ya nebi mina tumo maybe labjale guyes dedar mayba chidangi karo da ji 기부 충우당 다나신 기분 징기 구론당 삼바틴지 계제 랍잘이야 라바이미나 엔 투모웨 라자사 찬중 유스드네 송
Now, the reason why these are called the common and the particular precepts is primarily whether they, if they're the particular precepts, then if they're the common precepts, if they are mixed with or joined with the resolve of bodhicitta, then they become the particular precepts. And the reason for this is that when teaching them for the sake of others, if teaching them as teaching them in order to become a Buddha would become an obstacle for a particular individual, if it would cause them to become depressed or to regret it, then you would teach them the common precept. But if it is then joined or conjoined with the attitude or the resolve of bodhicitta, then it becomes a particular precept. And so, for example, with the precepts that are taught in the compendium of ascertainment, they can be either the common or the particular precepts, but it depends upon the motivation. If they are conjoined with the attitude of aspirational bodhicitta, then they become particular. Then they become the particular precepts. Otherwise, if they are taken with the motivation or the attitude of the lesser person or the middling person, then they become the common precepts.
다 투모웨기 랍잠 맹아 랍자텔리아 다 지단 다 텔레양 당부 군조숨 소수의 랍자 소소수기 랍자에 그래 다 텔레양 가웨 랍자도 주베 랍자 니예베 나네 다 당부 가베 랍자 셰블리아 당부 상계 군조
Now, for the common precepts, or the precepts that come from the tradition of instructions, there are particular precepts for each of the three jewels, and there are prescriptions, that is, things you must not do, and there are proscriptions, things you must not do, and prescriptions, things that you must do. So first for the proscriptions, the things you must not do, and for the proscription regarding the jewel of the Buddha.
다들랑 상계를 계속 손에 다들랑 가발 랍셔스 라고 김선 가라서는 강과스에서 미제규디 계속 손이 제규요 말에 밤 가오래서디 다들랑 랍셔 팀이야 가발 랍셔스.
And so for the proscription, when you go to the Buddha, the reason it's called a proscription is it's something that you are prescribed from doing, you must not do. Once you have gone for refuge, you must stop doing this, and so it is called a proscription. And the precept is, once you have gone for refuge to the Buddha, do not go for refuge to worldly gods.
대라양 계신 좀 샤라웨기 가르소르잖아. 데네 소수기 셈네 가르소 상겔이야 캡네 안다이 가르소 셈네 르마 당바이네야. 데네 가르소디 지딘베 라더버질이야 되네 차차와당 최번 묘알아 써봐 된지 제베 이미나 되네 조르와디 중세 뢰밤 조르와디 중세 녀바지 쳐요 그래서 녀바지 쳐요 조르와디 중세 녀바를 차되게 위해서 될 때는 그냥 아니 녀바끼요 그래서.
Now, what the spiritual master Shadowa said is that even if we do not reject the Buddha as the highest source of refuge, if we were to prostrate to or make offerings to a worldly deity, then the preparation for the action would be a bit inappropriate, would be somewhat wrong, and so therefore there would be a fault that arises from this.
다 telaya tene 상계 좀 된데 갑리야 김당 괴매 시진사데 쇼거래 김당 괴매 시진사데 다 상계급이야 진다 첨보래 진다 아주다 진다 치슈를 비슷해 야게는 지구도 장저에서 와 어다디 김당 괴매 시진디 아무거나 예외급이야 예외급이야 된다지 치에도 그 예불컵리야 저컵리야 근데 미탐제베 차왈란 조데도스 아다 가래 진제베 미상마 차왈란 가래슬레 비슷한 부다 상계 데지슈이스 라고 하르 얘는 상계기 센터하고 팅당부입니다 진짜 상계 센터하고 팅당부 인두산에 이 상계기 센터가 좀이 고란 체력 누만이야 박사 예바 텔레데네 박사 센 근데 공다시다 니 먹고니 근데 상계를 배 대바시 위켄 다 차는 니 먹고 대야스 지질이야 아니 상계기 외설기 총결 탐지 캡네 총결 탐지 캡이 언주산에 김다기 다 남랑이나 가이나 상계기 외설이 외인다 남랑이나 가라이나 섬 직다제시디 총계 괴잘 로두산에 아니 지딘베게 하이 댄지어스 라덴두치 라덴지에베 인두산에 대통령 인두산 대라 차세어스 대라 차세 인두산에 되네 람상지 가르 멤버 팁기 송와레스 다 멤버를 팁입니다 다 멤버를 팁시 왜나 멤버 차면로 어다 진제 루주야레스 네 인두산 다디 가르송으로서나 꺄블 템베 두시에 매경 섬으로 꺄 템베 두시에 매경 다 가다 차차와 좀 얘기한 되네 땡지 년도였어 어떤 드레스고요 그래
During the time of the Buddha, there was the patron of the Buddha, the Buddhist greatest and most generous patron was Anathapindada. So Anathapindada once went to Rajgir, and when he went to Rajgir, he saw that all of the people were very busy and were extremely busy with themselves. He asked them why, and they said, "Oh, the Buddha is coming. We're preparing for the Buddha." And this was the first time that Anathapindada had heard the name of the Buddha. And when he, just merely hearing it, because of imprints from previous lives, those imprints were awakened. And that night, he was unable to sleep. He had such great faith that he was unable to sleep. And in the middle of the night, then the light of the Buddha filled the entire city with light. And Anathapindada wondered to himself, what's going on? Is it dawn already, or is this the light of the Buddha? And when he went to go outside and see what it was, he saw that there were some worldly gods there. There was the god Hladen, and he thought to himself that this must be the Buddha, and prostrated to him. And at that moment that he prostrated to him, then it became suddenly dark. All of the light disappeared, and so this is the story that it was. Now, at this point, he was not conceiving of that God as a source of refuge, but merely by prostrating to the God, the light disappeared. And so this is said that even merely prostrating to a worldly God makes inauspicious connections.
어다들이 뉴스안에 이나양 중보단 지대면라다 탐지엘라 니지고네 또마땅하나 예바 매소 니지고네 또마땅하다 야 니지고네 지가슈에 바디들이야 드네 가르쳐야지 뼈다 메달라 소금 비와는 예바메스.
However, it's also said that if we give tormas to the worldly gods and the unruly gods out of compassion, if we do it out of compassion, then there is no fault. Likewise, if we give them incense, or if we offer them incense or flowers out of compassion, then there is no fault.
다 이내야 torma chesum 당에 걸려. chesum세 torma 당에 봐. torma세 당에. 다 디나로래 chesum고 torma 디나로래야. 근데 다 빼무쭉 테모 자르세야지야다. 지금 별라듯어. 샤르쇼 도지지 예라조 고단제 torma 비와디다 셴네 장아서 디쇼들 빼무쭉 테모 자르 같이 세야지야다. 다 기점도. 아다 빼무쭉 테모 자르세야지야래. 근데 지금 별라라디 차세 쇼면은 다디 torma chesum torma dinanta di gyutsirda gyuzata dinante gyutsi insare dinarade pimuzu tema jarsa karasl 다디 pimuzu tema jarsa 지당 디기 지덴베 하드 상말로 긴고르베 코른저 붙이지 긴고르베 와서도 주변이 뭐 도시엔 진짜가 토하는 지금 면에서 아직 정도 지딘 발하임베 하 란젠베 임비 균생게 비무조 테마자 마임바 디갈이야 대다 탐지 코라 탐지 긴고르베 조유 주베임바 아 근데 지금 누시에를 치세 근데 지금 토하네 아니 비무조 테마자 지금에서 근데 정도 딱 간다야 들으셔.
But here there's a problem, because there is the Torma ritual in 3 parts. And in this Torma ritual in 3 parts, there is a portion of this text where we say that we are kneeling in front of the worldly gods and joining our palms. And so, if we are not even allowed to make give prostrations to the worldly gods, how is it that in this Torma offering in 3 parts, which comes from the Tantras, how is it then that we could kneel before them and join our palms? And I think that this is because the worldly gods in the Tantras, the worldly gods are like emanations of the retinue of the mandala. So it's not considering them to be regular worldly gods, but rather than treating them as emanations of the primary deity of the mandala. So when we make when we kneel and join our palms to the worldly gods, it is not to the worldly gods as actual worldly gods, but I think that instead it is that we consider them to be the emanations of the principal deity, the mandala, and then kneel and join the palms.
단도나 지 닌지 왕감 왕기선 야나지 goba khabara jendo yebina anko bimuzu temaja sena be jigare dan dona tada samji tadugi gyawam gyabgi zowam gyabgi chodo gyuba dendejiliya sumba imina dene khar jigwa maras ina tegi negabgi taji lam jube kharjwa taji negab ji range kharjwa chudingi 다 파르제세웨기 조암 파르제세웨기 예 대더버질이야 조베즈 다나 신기 다 진짜 두시를 치시 때문에나 가와 매바 두송이브레.
And so in this way, if there is a particular reason, if we are doing it out of compassion, or for a particular reason, there is no fault to kneeling and joining our palms in such a manner. But if we are to think of them as the final source of refuge, the ultimate source of refuge, and our principal or highest source of refuge, and then kneel and join our palms, then that would not be all right. In any case, if in order to deal with the temporary circumstances, the particular circumstances of the point in the path, and in order to eliminate the obstacles that we face in a particular Dharma session, if at that point we kneel and join palms to them as friends, as companions, if we think that we are doing it to them as friends and companions, then there is no contradiction.
Tela gewe shinye ronde bachibu karasong sana pyo tamje deba yeso deba del suju sengi deba yes tene shana mage bomra syaje teyan james lona de yala shambu she jaju teyan james chana nyenjen thangla shi jaju teyan james pa changwan james oda tene jusan the pure the jaganga ten de ore the pure devares that the song that the jusane tan dona karsure telea ta kadambe lama komati zugi shebal tan dramde bongo yonde yusre gewesin chebo cheyuwege chen dijini yeredo shebina tongore sonta jamde no tongore chen dijini yeredo shebina tongore chen dijini yeredo majaben tongmaras gewesin chebo sharawe garsana reduji chena tongrures reduji shebina chen dile redu chena nda chechima redu chena reduji chesana tongrures ta de sheba midio yonde are ndona 가주에 다지 지딘베 하드 상월로 셰퍼스므로 룩지는 시네스 룩이 다보나시 룩지는 시네스 룩이 다보사데 지단 남기 참고 쳐봐 이나 쿠란주기 가라지 사 근데 디 룩주기 다보듯이 남기 참고를 치 야보를 치 하셔봐 다이나 쿠란주 지사 두줄래서는 뭐 수심이 세셔봐 tene papa songe da lugyu da bo tene jires papa so du zan papa songe de nam yu ko torje ani ya bo che ta ine ti torje ya bo chen tamare du se arba o tena shin chene an jidin be la de songlo tene ta jidangi dadange kondu shibe diso pyegen hande kashi oyang odisi karjueji sa top de de dang 지 규슈 제부 탑 되는데 유스그레 다 간다라야 지단지 되면 함께서 걸다 지단지 되면 하는데 얘는 년가 사버렸어 때문에 있는 년가 사버 고인급 내가 고인급 때 자자 풀어 그거 딱딱 써야 년가를 주 내봐겐 안들이 샤 년가를 루규다고 집어레스 파파 총계를 집어레스 안들이 순간 드링이 주산 디균셀 되네 아서로 가르된 거 그러잖아 되는지 상계 준비된 데에 투지를 니링 매와 다 진짜지기 다 킨즈 뉴스기 연대는 데가 드리지비 뉴스안에 텔레 때문이나 그런 지딘 배송마트 저기야 가셔를 가요 송마트 저기야 랑긴 한기 랑래야지 숨겹다 좋아다 되네 가셔에 야부치 그랬어 그래서 그래
The great Tibetan master Dromtimpa said that actually all Tibetans are ghost worshippers, saying the gods of the east, those are all ghosts. The gods of the south, those are all ghosts. The Nyenha Tangha in the west, all these gods are ghosts. And so basically he said that Tibetans all worship ghosts. Now there are many different Kadampa explanations. The great Kadampa master Chayulwa said that if we make offerings to ghosts with a hope for this or the next life, then we are violating the refuge vow, but not otherwise. The great master Sharoa, however, said that if we place our hopes in the worldly gods, whether we are placing our hopes in them for this life or for the next life, we are violating the refuge vow. But basically, the worldly gods are like shepherds. Shepherds take very good care of their flock. They treat their animals well and so forth, but when it comes down to it and they get hungry, then they'll take a sheep and kill it and eat it. And it's the same way with leather merchants and so forth. They take care of their herds until it's time to kill one and skin it for its hide. And so you have to be very careful for them. They treat you well for a little while, but in the end they will. They treat their animals well for a little while, but in the end they end up killing them. And so the worldly gods are, as I said before, and particularly the Tibetan gods are often like ghosts. And so we take care of them, and we may do. And for a while they may help us and so forth, but we have to be careful because in the end they may do something that that will end up taking care of us. They may end up doing something that'll kill us or harm us in some way. They're like the shepherds or the leather merchants. But the Buddhas have no bias at all, no sense of closeness or distance in the compassion. They have the great powers of wisdom, loving-kindness, and power. And so if we go for refuge to the Buddhas, then the worldly deities also will just naturally also protect us and be our companions.
다드네 최를 계속선에 심지를 차와본 거래 근데 송래.
Having gone for refuge to the Dharma, we need to give up violence towards or harm towards sentient beings.
다 심지를 차와본 것이 지단기 상기기 때문에 미스베르도 차와 차와메 베르도 차와 인스 차와메 베케버도 차와 인스 그래서 제가 십겹에 나는 너나 최네 미즈와 대시시고 남게 송스 다들이 송하.
And so being free of non-violent toward all sentient beings, or free of harm toward all sentient beings, is a particular trait of Buddhism. It is something that makes Buddhism superior. This is, as is said in the 400 verses, where it says that the dharma of not harming others is the dharma of the Tathagata.
개신이 좀 샤라에 가르쳐놓으잖아. 최이신이 시와래 심지에는 드네 유산은 심지에는 차와치야데 마시와래 드네 유다디 담배 취하다 개와래 드네 유산은 답변은 심지 둔주디줄이야 아니 별이야 디 심지 둔주디 너고디 그래서 bil 타고다라 너고 미야다 다가는 신기 류기 샤쥐어봐라 다가는 신기 에네 둔줄리야 딕소 쳐봐서 말아 둔주 동야다 되네 둔주디서 되네 봐 가르래 짜 차외나도 봐 주야다 안 둔주디서 타고에 당하라서 진짜 쉐위미나 되네 넘버 4와르스 드네 유산에 디균zel 데네 데네 가주에 둔줄이야 자와체비 미냐 데네 최근절 라 겹수송 이 가주 가베 랍샤다 게로리스 this one.
The great spiritual master Sharawa said that this is because the characteristic of Dharma is peace. And violence towards any sentient beings is a lack of peace, and so therefore it is contradictory or a violation of the Dharma. For example, with animals in Tibet, we will do things such as we'll pierce their noses and attach and tie a lead to their nose, or we will cut their flesh for meat, or we might beat them, or put them in iron cages behind bars, or bind them in ropes. All of these are things that are harmful or violent towards the animals. And so, if we do anything that is violent or harmful even to an animal, then this is a violation of the precept of the precept of going for refuge to the Dharma.
단도나 지당기 가수 나바상게 버진다 둔주당 배주다 돈셔 버다 둔주 마도베야 나바상게 버 인지 탐제게 둔주 배주 돈셔 말스 버주 냐르셔 말지 안 다나 생기 오마 쇼셔 말스서 기지시는 데 되고와 다 예베이네야 다티 가르서 그러스나 둔줄리야 하자 미삼바 베나지 둔줄라케 쿤르지 게베이네야 잘안도 지게위나 두두되게 미켜봐 근데 그 잘라 쿠르부치던데 봐 게위미나 지금 말해서 다 간다 두두들래야 참바단 세외고는 참마도 베들래야 되네 가르수지 세당당 다는 공초에 거네 이제가 통하네는 자와체비미나 아니 잠도 랍자던 게한도 그래서 소리를 인두산에 두둘이야 자와체고하다 두둘이야 그거지 딱
Now, generally in Buddhism, this doesn't mean that we cannot use animals. It wouldn't be right to say that we can't use animals in any way. It wouldn't be right to say that if you're Buddhist, you cannot keep cattle or you cannot milk them. But it means that we need to should not use animals in an inappropriate way. For example, if we are using them as pack animals to laden them with a burden that is more than they can, that they're unable to carry, would not be all right. Basically, we need to treat the animals with loving kindness and compassion. We should not treat the animals with aversion or with anger. If we are to do so, then that would be a violation of the precepts of going for refuge. And so for that reason, it is important for us to have love and respect for animals.
Dona? Gyöshin chimu sharawa karasunsa simjina tsawasadi ta une tanegi gyun rimbuji tarrinshi sungkas sumbre drin justan karasana simjina tsawachadi energy be nyugrim karaswerji di nimachi mai ni mai be 무튜니 송과야 지당 무튜니 지하고야 지당 안에 송깔에 하고요 하랬어 근데 소래 다들 인도스탄에 아주 소타르고 dombass야 돼야 셴은 내가 시대 제발 도와 이미 인도스탄에 근데 심지에 차와 봐요 그래 전주습이 수름서야 돼야 되네 닝제외 권에 심지에 셴은 닝제외 권에 셴은 내가 시대 제발 도와 이미 인자 뒤균제나 되네 전주습이 냠래야 다 텔레 두요아래 되는 너나 에너지 가르소에 가르소다 다 dombassum이 냠래 탐제 에너지 바지 닌자와들 가르소에 처음에 버텔렌 뉴스라나 바지 머리버스케 메베소치 다 드린 뉴스안에 닝부 냠래 닝부야 대임바라라 아니 수아데 데스칼라 하와스 그래서 드린 뉴스 티균젤 되네 아주 nendengi gone ane tsawa mebala ya Allah goyade kechamisre
The spiritual master Shadawa said that practicing non-violence or non-harm toward all sentient beings is a very long road. It is a very difficult thing to do. It's something that we don't do for just one day or for just 2 days. It's something that we need to do for a long time, and we need to maintain continuously. And this makes it difficult to do. So when we hold the pratimoksha vows, the vows of individual liberation, the essence of the pratimoksha vows is that we are abandoning harming others and the basis for such harm. And so this practice is naturally part of giving up violence or harm for sentient beings. Likewise, the bodhisattva vow is out of compassion for other sentient beings, is avoiding harming others and benefiting others. And so in this way, the practice of the bodhisattva vow is also contained within giving up harm or giving up violence towards sentient beings. So basically, all the three vows, all three types of vows are contained within giving up harm for sentient beings. This is the essence of Buddhist practice. And it is something that is difficult to do. And so for that reason, it is important for us to put emphasis in doing this, on giving up harm or violence for sentient beings. It's important for us to do this in our practice. And then it is said, having gone for refuge to the Sangha, give up negative friends.
다 진상 자박하시지기 안에 아주 좋아다 고주 좋아선 라고 도스 저는 아주 좋아다 고주 좋아서 대베 링 다란라 남바상게 베체도 미주비 차도 도스 드레송네
Now, in saying giving up negative friends, speaking about this, the great spiritual master Potawa said that these days there are some monks who talk a lot about our side and their side. And as long as we are thinking about there being an our side and a their side, then we are no longer included among the ranks of Buddhists.
템발레야 남바 상게바 베나제 나도 별을 차샤위미나 에너지 다들지 싸게 끈인사 되게 추규 중에서 문자를 쉬어요. 추규 미다요 되게 윈디 추규 따지단게 나가 유이 나기루이 나사제 나니마이 세와 삼시기 잠들랍자다 겐도고 알았어요 말데 이베이네야 땅 나기루이 나 거유이 미윤센기 윤센도 전에 추규 신달이야 지 대지 가서에 등수 전에 내가 본 말에 그저도 할래야게요 말해서 서로 드리지 등수 전 진짜 제비미나 되네 잠들랍자다 겐도요
Now, within the teachings, such as in Tibet we have the Sakya, Kagyu, Gelok, and Nyingma traditions. We have these different lineages. And just saying, I'm Kagyu, or I'm Sakya, or I'm Geluk, or I'm Nyingma, in itself does not break the precepts of the refuge vow. But if we say, I'm a Kagyu, and so therefore, therefore, on that basis, begin to criticize the other traditions, saying they don't have anything special, they're wrong, and so forth. If we denigrate them in that way, then this would be a violation of the refuge precepts.
다 디베 초보스다 오마데 다 디리 텐드비미다 냠돈 로네 냠돈 로사데 냠돈 로데버디 지보스고 말아 냠도 치니 대당 에너지 가루에 삼바도 저로 튠버체네 코다 초보찬 아니 그 삼저 튠버 체베입니다. 근데 되게 저보다 전에 아니 잡들랍스던 게 좀.
And so when it says here that to give up negative friends, the negative friends means that when we are, it means that when we befriend a negative friend, and it doesn't mean that when we just spend time with him, but it means that our own intentions and our own actions become similar to theirs. So we become friends with them. Our actions and our intentions become similar to theirs, and that is what it is meant by befriending or having negative friends. And so if we do that, it is a violation of the refuge precepts.
너나 디베트 호버사 디 가사디기 삼저 상헬래야 따비로 이말에 마도베게 에네 무디 바이나 제 가르소에 디베트 호잉가 무디 바단 조나 거다 무디 바이나 디베트 호잉 바다 남바 상게 바이나 디베트 호보 마이 비차바게요만 삼삼 무디 바단 조네 데네 가르소에 지 यार ड्रायर समसम नांगबा जन दूर ड्रायर तेरे हिंदुस्तान ठीक यूंसेल देने दोना मुदी बसाते हैं मुदी बसाते थाने थे मुलतिक सर ताकि हम जो मुलतिक से हिंदुस्ताने ता मुस हिंदुस्ताने अन था रुचिल कोरबा तेरे टिक से हिंदुस्तान था लोगों रुचिल किचरबा एक्सट्रीम 인지겔 extreme 저지래. 타직도 타직진배 따와 차고 임직 딘드셔야 되게 내가 차고 제대게 셔바 차고 해야 돼. 나대서 되게 무디 봐. 그래. 링두산 디균셀 때네 지 출루게 당신 첨부 해야 돼 봐. 초신 첨부 해야 돼. 나대서 무디 봐래. 링두산 때다도 형도 drop 이미나. 그 넘버 상게 인도 축이야. 밍 넘버 상게 봐 따나야 나 되게 무디 봐 차대요. 링두산 때다도 drop 이나. and they were trouble on drop the K. Puts the meva yellow.
Now, so when we talk about a negative friend, then what this depends upon is that particular individual's intentions and actions, whether those are good or bad. And so often we talk about non-Buddhists, or the Tirtik or Mutikpa in Tibetans. We talk about them as being non-friends. But actually, sometimes there are Buddhists who are negative friends at all. Sometimes when we befriend the non-Buddhists, then actually we get better. We improve. And sometimes when we befriend Buddhists, then we get worse. And so for that reason, when we think about the non-Buddhists, or in Tibetan, the Mutikpa, which we could literally translate as extremists. So they're called extremists because they've gone to extremes. So the syllable mu in Mutikpa means an extreme, and Tikpa means like going to that extreme or falling to that extreme. So these are people who have really solidified views, whose brains are frozen. They have such strong attachment. And if these are the negative friends, these are the extremists that are meant here. And it doesn't matter whether if they have such a strong view, and then in actuality they are extremists. Whether or not they are called by the name Buddhist or not, they may be called Buddhist, but if they have such a strong view and such a strong bias for one side or the other, then in actuality they are extremists. And even if they're called Buddhist, there is not even the slightest difference between them and the extremist non-Buddhists.
나나 계시니 가담 고만을지 가르쳐 버렸잖아. 되네 다 간다라 딘제지기 가져야지. 가져 촉신 다 템바 상기기 때문에 남편술이야 지 가져에 초리다 차당 예대비 메디조 되네 메디조 그랑 지 대조 가르에 초대 차단도 추리 시합을 될 때네 깜조야 양gar 쿠즈데 깜조 양gar 슈가 차대 알았어 sem게 깨고 말 당보는 깨고 말해서 믿어서 깨고 말을 깨반 잡고 누나 양결 sem게 양결 슈가 차대 알았어 직도 저거를 받아서 땅마다 요 말해서 고살한테 내가 말했어 직도 저거를 받아서 동안에나 강가편 도 말했어 다르공거 자당 야가라도 리공거람 가서에 매나 야게라메베 캡 야가라메 매나 리공라메베 캡세야 근데 딱 한다 야가라 리공거라니 유에참냠 매참냠 두투나 강가편 도 말했어 아디 강가편 도 말했어 드네디 디균세라 데네 답 긴둥이 대암 에지 템발레야 추리 생긴데서 추리 생긴이나 랑가 파이야로 마이야로 캠보이나야로 호병이나로 대주단 로로 말았어 드린주산에 네 바대주 가르쳐 탑 개비고네 안 다른 부채고로 해서 대수용이래
And so basically what the what the Kadampa forefathers said is if there is someone who has such strong bias and such a strong attachment to their side and aversion to other sides, if there are Buddhists who even within the Buddhist tradition have such strong biases and attachments, then if someone has done this, then they need to take the refuge of vows over again. If they try to arouse bodhicitta, there's no way they can actually develop bodhicitta. And they need to take the bodhisattva vows over again. There's absolutely no benefit at all for them to begin to consider the logic, such as the logic of being neither single nor multiple. No matter how much they contemplate this, they will not be able to understand it. There's no benefit at all. Even if they spend their time debating the basic logics, such as the difference between rabbit horns and yak horns. If something's a yak horn, then it exists. A rabbit horn doesn't exist. And debating the differences between rabbit and yak horns, even that, there's no way that this can bring them any benefit at all. And so basically, no matter who it is, if it is someone who has bias within the community of the Sangha, someone who has sectarian feelings and strong sectarian biases, whether they be your father, whether they be your mother, whether they be your kempo, whether they be your master, it is not appropriate to spend time with such people, and you should try to distance yourself from them skillfully.
보도와 계획신이 보도와 부중와 줄이야 참으로리야 아니 건지슈네 다들 본보사야 되지 별이야 본보사야 되다 남바 이민서 저버저러 내자 다 본보를 때문에 다들 예바도 연구를 말했어 다들 가서 디베 정보다 민조사디 예바도 연구를 말했어 디베 정보다 저베기 예바도 연구를 말을 슈디사네 아 연구 말았어 그럴 때는 예바 연구 말았어 본보를 때는 예바 연구 말았어 되네 대배 뽐보서 말해 대바 이 초바서 같은 여러분 대배 뽐보듯이 되네 예바 연도 가버렸어 그것도잖아 노보소소소리야 되와 텔레야 누가 됐어랬잖아 최세된 게 화변당 내대 기보드데 알았어 내대 기보드데 자기인데 나와 잡거든 나 대절 때는 예바도 용 타줘야랬어 본볼 때는 용 많았어 대절 때는 용 그랬어 들이 좀 말해 나디 준전에 가라서나 다 가르쳐야지 당기 쉬거든 시에 예바디 참참 마쳐야지 나로는 마용디 남바 상기베 나로는 마 용대야디 예보다 망가요. 대라야 때 미룬사야디, 저 미룬사야디야 배 콜이야 가르쳐야지 가르쳐야 코번 나고 치고 사야디 나 말했어. 다가나시 군이 좁아 겹쳤어야디 나 말했어. 양 때 미룬스다 저 미투임바 차. 콜 좁아 겹네. 추보 겹사야디 나 말했어. 드린 주산에 디고 간다를 수수 탑 개별고네. 아달 디기 코랑게 삼바도 저와티기 수술이야 슈게 냐바 메테바 tende cheche an ta jangsing go imre so.
There's a story about that. There are two great masters, Potowa and Puchungwa. Once this person came to ask the two of them, if I'm a friend with a Bumpo, then do I have this, am I violating the refuge vow by befriending a negative friend? Is there a fault here or is there not? And they said, oh, there's no problem at all, no wrong at all, no problem at all. And so then the person said, well, what if I make friends with the chieftains of the various different valleys? Is there a problem there? No, there's really no problem there. Where the problem comes is when you start to get, when you start to make friends with old Dharma teachers and those elders of the Sangha, those people who have really strong views and really strong sectarian biases. When you do that, that's when you get the, that's when you incur the faults and break the precept. Just befriending the, and that's far worse than befriending the Bumpos or the others. And so, as this is saying, actually the faults, the wrongs, most of the wrongs and most of the faults come from within Buddhism. There are more that come from within our community than outside. Now, so when we say that we shouldn't befriend negative friends, then this is that it's not appropriate to befriend them and not appropriate to keep their company. This doesn't mean that we should therefore then get into fights with them, that we should argue with them. It doesn't mean that we should have quarrels with them. It doesn't mean that we should hold it against them inside of ourselves. Instead, it means that skillfully we need to distance ourselves from them so that they are unable to influence our own intentions and actions.
Dona dati geshima isara karesana sangi yusung debade jiwi gyunzende ta lelo wang jibres jinju nyendo disu lelo chetan lazy chetan deba jisu des sangi shaka tube dembade kades jiru la du zebe wang jiru argument somara badaji conflict argument. That conflict argument di 저바 데 간데스 용거라서나 디 칠로는 저바 세베 기절해요 말에 데네 상기기 제스 주고 남핀지 대 나네 잠변지 가르죠 지 긴뒤바 남핀지 데네 저바 체는 증조였을 수가 데네 유사 디균셀 데네 저바 사데 상기기 다 때마지가 다 유 임바다 도 세제 농대 땡여빈 두산은 아주 녀버도 됐어 싶죠. 가시에 그가 파 태준매와 파주 가셔야지 주다 펜션리 앞에 연제 차당 다나지 착당치 않 태준자는 매와 그런 가르쳐 배 인샤샤는 지겨하래. 대자네요. 수수께자 가르치면 마시에 걸어 삼로 마타양 배 삼로 팅 숨시스 바 땅고 삼로 팅 숨시스 바 땅 어당엔데 깨지 셰비 다 띵원에스네 지 템바지비 줄 차게 여다면도 나랑 외에다 지 안자창고 지 야보시지 랍시스하면도 얘네 다 템바지비 줄 차게 도면도 삼로 야보동 안드니 주사 디준세데네 아주지 티버시 중이네 안다도 다하나 신기 춥다 펜주인의 안라도 간다르 창물로 샤데 개좀 쉽지래 샤다 가르지 타고에 나와 당난 자마도 나야 되네 지질래야지 군딥 당 가르쳐 초리 시라 마시네 야보네.
This is a very extremely point, very interesting. Excuse me. This is a very important point. For example, the teachings of the Buddha Kashyapa, what caused the teachings of the Buddha Kashyapa to disappear were the actions of his own followers. It was because his followers were lazy. They were so extremely lazy that his teachings disappeared. Likewise, it is said that with the teachings of the Buddha Shakyamuni, that what will cause them to despair, what will destroy them, are quarrels and debates, conflict and argument. And so how is it that these conflict and arguments are going to occur? It's not that they're going to come from outside, it's that they will be within Buddhism, mutual arguments and debates among Buddhists. And in particular, it will be among the members of the Sangha. So when we have debates and quarrels, or when you have debate, then this can be the cause of the Buddhist teachings to disappear. And so for that reason, we need to be especially careful about this. There are some people who don't think about this all and have no doubt they will say something that's very sectarian, and they take it as being absolutely true, and they say it right off without thinking. And we must not let this happen. Before we say something, we need to think about it 3 times or 4 times. We need to think, is what I'm about to say something that will destroy the teachings or not? We need to think about this carefully. It might be true, it might be right, but if I say it, is it going to cause harm to the teachings? So whether we are talking about the difference between the foundation vehicle and the Mahayana, whether we're talking about the differences between the philosophical schools, we may need to think about them very carefully. At the very least, even if we are not able to develop pure perception, we should at the very least try to avoid criticizing the other schools, and it's good to avoid having any sectarian biases.
Today, you stand that per kanjing jolia, to the dismid of Kashijare, Jeza, the Samarolia, the per number sang gave us, said to stand, Dodo Jimmy, which is Siburu Toja, the Kochi, Nachi inside of Jipaji, part of the stand of Kasu or the Chadi, the Mimochi, now the only other. That turned on me, Karjo Pergi, energy, should have the Samalo, Pinzu, Jigzilla, Karjo, turned on the Jibujigan of Chadi. Mimara was out of Tambo Gomba Chat of Justan, Gombegi, Chat of Sajegi, Min Mida Chane, energy, Sajegi mean the Chugu de la Toa de Rabatan. Then Lame mean Chugu the Toa de Rabatan. Then Dead Zamado Begi, Munet and the Mindre Cabra Chishi Shoshalana, the Mindre Cabra years among share it. Share the share, Diane, share but some shaggy Shark Wanakala Havare. Penna Jabang, one could go at Jabang, the Shirp Chimbu, Italian Laga Mess, than the Shish with Tower. Jeresiki, one could go ya, that Delan Laga Mess in the Shikara. Today, you stand that Casus schedules that the Jigadi, the Lela Bredita, Jabang and the Jeres Yam to Sushan, and the Nisuk Shirp Chere. This was Suji Carredi Niji Cheres, that Kalakabrja, Jabe and Niji Chunsan and Dumarawati. Jeres Shirp Chunsan and Kalakaborova, Shetu Kalakaborova. The Gunzel Denetine, the Casus schedule elaborate, Niganyam the Shituza Kalak. Tell her Jungishia that to do this gets of Jungishia Mata Disamata.
So in Tibet we have various different schools, and there are some differences between the schools. Often, Tibetan Buddhism, we see it as actually being, it should actually be just one tradition, but it doesn't seem like that. It seems like that we have all these different separate different schools. But even though it seems like there are these different sects and schools, in actuality the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism are all the same. It's just different names that are given to them. Maybe the tradition was a monastery was founded in a particular place, and then that place name was given to that tradition. Or it was taught by a particular guru, and that guru's name was given to the tradition. And so, of course, there are different features of each of these. And when we speak about each of the traditions individually, then we can talk about their own particular features. But actually, when we start looking at them, it gets difficult to say that there are differences. For example, it's like when we give an empowerment. If you're giving the Manjushri empowerment, then you have to say he has the ultimate prajna of the Buddhas. When you give the Avalokiteshvara empowerment, then you say that Chenrezig Avalokiteshvara has the greatest compassion of all the Buddhas. Now, when you're speaking about each of them separately, it's easy, of course, very easy to say this, but then when you take the two together, it gets more difficult. So does this mean when we talk about Manjushri and Avalokiteshvara, who's greater? Who's got more wisdom? Who's got more compassion? How can we say that? If we say that Manjushri's compassion is inferior, we can't really say that. If we say that Avalokiteshvara's prajna is inferior, it'd be difficult to say that either. And so even though they can be explained differently when we explain them separately, it's the same way, it's difficult to say that when we look at them. And so for that reason, we need to look at the Tibetan traditions in this way. Now there's a story that I need to tell about this, and it wouldn't be right not to tell the story, so I'm going to go a little bit over time.
It's not little bit, it's so much. 다들이야 종류를 이제 돈도르지. 천사 종계죠. weapon 개방하면 천사 종계죠. 알았어. 천사 종계 되겠다. 그런 총기 나올 때 딱 그 천사들도 잡았던 거로다. 다 장문로다. 다 당보들 그 푹지킨 푹지킨 다. 양 쓰이듯이 내 푹디. 내가 내 푹디 원래 전에 찾고 싶지였어. 천사 컨디션 비는 다들 푹디 까토레스. 나는 야 푹디 난 주도 말해. 천사 컨디션 비는 내 푹디 까토레스. 양 진짜로 그 지지기 동지기요. 다 양들 동들을 찍쓰이다서 너무 컨디션이됐어. 닌 동디 원래 뭐 컨디션을 봐 주잖아요. 다 정말 핑로레스다. 봐 정말로 되더래. 드린 주사다. 양조디 원래 동디 쓰이달라레스. 다 디나는 미중은지게. 미중은지 그들이 잡았던 미중은지 주요. 나래 저랑 좋아지였을라레스. 결혼기 푹들라 결혼은 동지 쪽은 가르쳐야 되라레스. 푹들라 동지 쪽은 가르쳐야 되라레스. 대고 지신디셔를 많이 해서 가르쳐 푹디 솔직히 로마를 라사라. 동지 가르이나 핑도를 라사드산. 대고 지신디셔 많이 대고 할랜데드레스. 대답이 삼상 아주 체화를 저를 시에요 주산에 individualism 소소소소 카 소소체니 체화시리다 레나버지 스지 쳔버지 대추 도어제니 도도르지 소디 깔라가고도 나 딩주산에 딩준제데네 하고 가르레 다디 개발을 치다 그래.
So once there was a weapons merchant. So a weapons merchant in old Tibet, and so he went to the market and he set up and he said, "I've got this shield. This shield." He was like really speaking highly. He was praising his, bragging about his weapons that he was selling. "I've got this shield. This is the greatest shield. Nothing at all can break this shield or pierce this shield. You'll be completely protected with this shield. This is the greatest shield you could ever have. Look at it. It's so great." Then he said, I've got this spear. This is the greatest spear. Whatever you thrust this spear into, it'll pierce it. Nothing can stop this spear. It's the greatest spear you can have. It can pierce anything. So then there was this clever guy who came up to him. He heard him and he came up to the guy and he said, "So you've got this great shield that nothing can pierce and this spear that can pierce everything. Well, what about, can your spear pierce your shield?" And the guy had nothing left to say. He couldn't say anything. What is there to say about that? He'd already praised the shield as being able to stop anything, and he praised the spear as being able to pierce everything. So now what could he say? He was just dumbfounded. And so it's like that. When we talk about the individual qualities of greatness, then it's easy to talk about the specific qualities of greatness, and it seems really grand when we do this. But when we start bringing things together and to make it into a whole, then it really becomes very difficult.
함내도 소디 찍거래 참바든지 곰되고 찍거래 똥만이 곰되고 찍거래 테스트 기체시다면라면라 테스트 야래 이내 다 기체시다면라 또 용어적으로 테스트면라 테스트 말아야지 애니베 말아래 시에토만 변 배바이 뭐 찍바이 발이야 아니 지 가시지 수보링아 가시 통 가시 나래래 가시 나리지 아니 가시 미치 뭐 가시 미춘준 잡리 요소다 이내 다 뛰기 되네 배바 말했을라도 뭐 and you start teaching them and this jiggy shivji hard legendary that shivji mindrachim inside this document that then you start teaching them and sound chikore the rs that is me that they must show me.
And so the Tibetan traditions are slightly different, but even so, in terms of being the practice, they take the practice of the external vows of individual liberation, the practice of the conduct of the Bodhisattva, and the practice of the secret mantra Vajrayana. They're all the same in meditating upon love and compassion. They're all the same in terms of meditating upon emptiness. And so they're really all the same in essence. These are the same in essence. Of course, there are different ways that they speak about them, but that's natural. It's fine for there to be different ways to speak about things. It's like if you have Tibetans, with Tibetans, there are different types of Tibetans. Some are tall, some are short. Some have straight noses, some have bulbous noses. They look different. Some are greater and smaller. There are different ways. You cannot say that just based upon these differences that they are not Tibetan. And so, like with the different traditions, if there's some small difference between the two, difference in explanations, you get really astounded about that, then that's not okay. Actually, they are all the same in essence.